It's odd the things that we remember sometimes. I was walking down the toy aisle a couple of days ago, looking for something to give my soon to be 3-year-old niece for her birthday. Everything was brightly colored and cheerful, starting with a turtle with a head that bobbed up and down when you pulled its tail, and ending with what looked like a mashup between a dragon and a fairy princess colored all in pink. And there, dead center in the middle of the aisle, was a loosely gathered bunch of Care Bear toys. Cawing and sweet, their eyes stared up at me, as if to say what a wonderful gift they'd be for a small girl of 3. I reached down and picked up the dark blue Grumpy Bear. Of all the bears, he had gone through the least changes over the years. I think it's because his mind is the strongest. He has no need to change his shape or form to keep his sanity. I put the bear back down and gazed at it. Odd thing to think of, but then, it was an odd Care Bear's tail I had seen, too. Or maybe thought I saw. The whole thing has the quality of a fever dream to it, which is appropriate since I was sick at the time. And, as I looked at the little storm cloud on his tummy, I remembered. It was a sunny afternoon in March. A temperature of 101 and vomiting had kept me home from school that day. I had passed the worst stages of my sickness earlier in the morning, and I was now thoroughly enjoying myself on the couch, consuming anything the TV would throw my way. My mom had left to run some errands, so I was alone in the house. Normally, I would have abused this freedom by raiding some ice cream out of the freezer. I was too tired, though, and still felt slightly nauseous. That might explain why I didn't change the channel when the brightly colored bears came on. At 9 years old, I had far passed the age where Care Bears would have been an okay thing to watch. But tired and slightly sick, I let it play. I remember the villain was someone called Professor Coldheart. He looked like a cheap Mr. Clean knockoff, and with a frozen blue skin, white hair, and a creep stare. The only thing, his whole thing was that he hated feelings because of something. Honestly, he reminds me now of one of those stupid Captain Planet villains. Why did they pollute the environment? Because if they didn't, there wouldn't be a villain to fight. Duh. Maybe I'm expecting too much out of a show aimed for toddlers, though. There was a lot of back and forth about feelings, with the fuzzy little mascots going on and on about joy and caring. So, sick or not, I was getting up to change the channel because I was actually going to be sick if I had to hear the word caring one more time. Suddenly, Professor Coldheart pulled out a large black book.
But they have promised me if I call them, they will end all feeling.
Coldheart exclaimed while opening the book. The little bears all seemed confused, all except Grumpy Bear.
Care Bears, don't let him read from that book, he exclaimed. Tenderheart, call for the stair.
A little reddish-brown bear with a heart on his tummy nodded.
Care Bears, line up,
he called. But even as he did, Coldheart began to chant. I sat on the floor and watched, wide-eyed. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. No, that's a lie. Or rather, not entirely true. He wasn't speaking English. He wasn't speaking any language I've ever heard. But my mind was forming pictures. They weren't happy. They involved large black masses that ate the stars and writhing and squirming things long enough to wrap around the world. Tenderheart faltered, with a hand to his head, and the other bears quickly followed suit. They lie in wait for the stars, I heard Tenderheart mutter. A cavernous portal opened behind Coldheart, and he giggled, a giggle full of madness and no glee. Grumpy Bear stood up and stared at it in horror. Shadowy things that flickered in the edge of vision began to appear on the screen, coming from the opening. Looking back, it was some fantastic animation. I haven't seen its like since. The shadowy things were reaching out forward towards the bears. Grumpy Bear's tummy glowed, and he summoned forth several thunderclouds. He used them to set up a protective barrier for the bears, lightning arcing from them and sizzling the shadowy things as they closed in. It wasn't going to be enough, though, and although I would have been ashamed to admit, my little 9-year-old self was kind of scared. The shadowy things bore a strange resemblance to things flickering through my own head now. Grumpy Bear looked from Cold Heart to the bears and then, I swear, straight at me. I mean, I knew he was just animated to be looking at the camera, but it felt like he could see me. Whoever else was watching, feel our fear. He nodded.
I have to break the connection,
He said, turning back to Cold Heart. He closed his eyes and concentrated, his tummy lighting up brighter than I had ever seen. A gigantic thundercloud appeared above them, filling the entire building. Cold Heart looked up as in awe. Then a gigantic lightning strike fell from the cloud. At first I thought it was going to strike Cold Heart. Instead, it fell at his feet. He screeched and jumped backwards, losing his balance. And when he did, he fell backwards into the portal behind him, still holding the black book. There was a mighty clap of thunder and the screen turned white. For a moment, I wondered if we had a power surge that hurt the TV. After a few moments, it cleared though. Grumpy Bear was going to each bear now, picking them up off of the floor, patting them on the back, saying a few encouraging words. I can't live with it, a green bear with a clover on his belly said. I saw things. So many things. Don't worry, good luck, Grumpy said, patting on the bear's back. You won't have to. None of you will. Then it rolled the credits. I crawled back over to the couch and hauled myself back up. I was slightly disappointed. I wanted to know what Grumpy meant. But I pushed it from my mind. It was just a Care Bears episode after all. I remember the first movie coming out slightly afterwards, serving as a sort of a reboot to the franchise. No more Cold Heart and a whole bunch of different pastel-colored animals to play with along the bears. I never saw the episode again and never bothered seeking it out. 13 years later, found me in an English literature class at an out-of-state college. It was one of those classes where everyone from freshmen to seniors could be found in it. I was in my senior year and I just needed a random class to fill out the general education block. For some reason at the end of class, a bunch of us got together and started talking about shows we used to watch when we were little. The subject eventually turned to the Care Bears. You know, I saw the strangest episode when I was 9, I said. I quickly outlined the dramatics with Cold Heart in the book. Everyone stared at me as if I had gone off my gourd. Are you sure you just didn't hallucinate it? The god of my right said, that we call it the Patster said. Wait, he's right, a blonde freshman named Callie exclaimed. But it wasn't Cold Heart, it was No Heart. Who the heck is No Heart? I asked, turning to her. He's the main villain from the novella series, the one that came after the Deke episodes. He had a black book, like you said, and all the bears seemed confused except Grumpy. He was flipping out. Also, No Heart called on his shadowy monster things the young ones, she laughed. I don't know how it ended. It actually scared me enough I changed the channel. She shook her head. It was Care Bears, though, so how bad could it have been? She became thoughtful for a second. It was near the end of the novella run, though. Might have been the last episode. Yeah, I vote both of you are nuttier than the Nut House, Pastor said, and the group laughed in agreement. The conversation piqued my curiosity, though. The school had some computers that were free for students to use that ran at the blazing fast dial-up speed of 56 kilobytes per second. This was back in 1998, so the internet was not as instant answer place as it is now. Hell, Google was still called Google Beta, and I viewed it with suspicion because it was new. I ended up using Yahoo, and let me tell you, it's not much better now than it was then. A couple hours of searching left me with no clues. I could find no mention of either Callie's episode or mine anywhere. I let it lie there. There have been a couple of series since then. Bears have come and gone, but Grumpy has always been there. From what little I've seen, largely unchanged. Sometimes I wonder if there were others out there who saw the strange episode as each series finished out. Deep down, I don't really want to know. I think if I did know, I'd have to accept some facts that I really don't want to. Snapping out of my reverie, I got ready to leave the toy aisle. I turned back one last time to look at the bears, and then, almost on impulse, I reached down and picked up the grumpy bear. Perhaps I owed him that much, and perhaps there were worse things that could snuggle next to my niece as she slept.